Good morning, fellas, and
Morning.
welcome back to our study, the Gospel of John. And Steve, again, thank you for bringing that hymn this morning, which is so appropriate with where we are. We're in week 275, John, and we're going to move off of John 2017 and progress forward to 18. And this morning's session is called A Story to Tell. The text reads one verse: Mary Magdalene came from the tomb, I would add, and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord, and that he had said these things to her. That's our text. Mary returns from the tomb, and of course, I've already said this, I've seen the Lord. She then tells the disciples what he said to her, which we don't have uh, any insight into. She doesn't say what it is, but that's it. That's all she says. There's no explanation, but it is a wonderful example of the word witness. And that's what we're going to talk about, the idea of witness. I think it's striking. I mean, it's simple, it's often passed over, well, or obvious, but like we often do, we're going to stop and analyze this occasion. At the very moment where we are in our story of the resurrection has occurred and the ascension has not yet occurred. But when the resurrection enters human history, it's delivered as a story to tell. That's the idea, story to tell. Mary's story, it's simple, direct. She has encountered someone, the resurrected the Christ. She names him. She shares what he said. It's personal, it's immediate, it's relational, and she's not trying to prove anything. She is simply bearing witness. And that is the key idea this morning. So, what this verse is showing us is that Mary is now moving from clinging, verse 17, clinging to her own constructs, clinging to what she's familiar with, her own narrative. She's moving from clinging to telling or bearing witness. There's other stories. We're looking at Mary's story, but we all, over time, all of us build either by design or by default, we build a story. And some of those stories are such. Some tell a moral story. By the way, I'm not being critical of these stories here. It's what our witness tends to evolve into, is the idea where we're moving into other stories. It doesn't, I'm not validating or dis, disvaluing the stories themselves, but we need something to tell. And so here's three examples of how our stories tend to migrate into um, a variation. Some tell a moral story, and the emphasis on is on example and imitation. By the way, I'm a real fan of this. I think Jesus is really noteworthy, meaning we need to pay attention to Jesus because Jesus is showing us who God is. Jesus shows us how to live true and to follow. It answers how we should live, the moral story. It's compelling, yes, but on the downside of it, it can subtly place the weight back on human shoulders. It's my opinion through my own observing my own life and the lives of people around me and the much broader context within my area of Christianity, that we as people tend to move towards putting the weight on our shoulders. It really becomes, even though we talk about justification by faith, I I think hands down we have a tendency to put a Jesus plus, and however we frame it. So I think the moral story is a great story. However, if I start using that story as a judgment to my own performance, it really becomes a burden, and that's unfortunate. Another story, and I'm a real fan of this story, is the participatory story. Here, something has happened to humanity, like in the river analogy we talked last week, Steve. Something God has done through the incarnation, through to all of humanity in Christ. It's not just for us. It's not about Jesus doing something for us, not entirely. Yes, there is truth to that, but he's doing it with us or as us. The incarnation, cross, resurrection, and ascension are realities we share in, and it answers what is now true of us. That would be the framework for the river that Steve mentioned and in session 274. So that's another story. There's the moral story, there's the participatory story, and the last one, of which we're probably most familiar with in our tradition, is the legal story. Still others tell a legal story, and the focus in this story is guilt, would be separation, it would be guilt, penalty, resolution. It answers the question, how can God forgive? It's structured, it's clear, its logic is easy to follow. That would be the bridge analogy that we looked at last week as an introduction. It's really quite simple to follow, and law is easy to follow because of general self-perception. We all, or at least I know I'm a sinner, and so the bridge or the legal story fits right into that framework really, really nicely. Self-perception and the promise of deliverance through a transaction. Jesus becomes our transaction, and in a legal sense. So there's that third story. And I would say there are aspects of truth within each of those. I would say that. And I think we all tend to land and interpret the gospel story within these three avenues of thought. They're a summary. But now we go back to Mary's story. We look at the text itself. But before all of these stories that we tend to land on, there is Mary's story, the first story of resurrection. And her story is a witness story. And here is where this is something we don't think about much, but her story is a witness story. And it's, I've seen the Lord, and this is what he said to me. This raises a question worth thinking about for all of us. Actually, for me. I wrote this question for me because I really like thinking about the other stories. Because of the way I'm wired, I'm curious. I like to try to understand. And when it comes to the cross, the mechanism of the cross is something that really captures my attention. And so I'm writing this as a question to me. This raises a question worth thinking about that I need to think about. What story am I telling? To what degree has my need, again, I'm speaking to me, my need to explain replaced my experience of seeing? In what ways have I become unlike Mary? I love the image of she is excited. She has just been with the Lord. She has had a major turning in her experience from clinging to now, I can't wait to tell my friends. Um, I had a season of that early in my life. I'm finding myself at age 72 with times of real celebration and enjoyment. The story I'm now telling is different than I did years ago, but I can honestly say that at this stage of life there are more times of joy in telling the story, um, the same story that Jesus, that Mary is witnessing to. So I've known, probably like all of you, I've known both. I've known the mechanics, um, and with me, that is very true because of my interest in the mechanics, what actually happened. But the story that Mary's telling brings a breath of fresh air and joy as a human being is expressing to her friends what has happened to her. And I think that is absolutely wonderful. Mary's story says nothing about the mechanism, like I just said, the mechanism of what just happened. She's not in a theoretical or theological realm of thinking. Her story carries something essential and something, I would say this, something that all human beings can respond to and applaud to. It sounds like someone who has just seen and heard. You think about the impact enthusiasm has on all of us. And it does. When we see someone excited about something that has happened to them, it actually is an avenue for us to engage with them. And that's what's happening in this scene. So perhaps the invitation is not to abandon our frameworks. I don't think I have been doing anything wrong at all in investigating mechanism, the dynamics of what actually occurred on the cross or through the incarnation. It happens to be the very theme and central to where we are in the book. But how to hold that is a really good question to ask myself. How to hold these stories in relation to the story, uh, so that whatever story we tell carries what we have witnessed. I think that's the bulk of what we're looking at here. Again, it's so easy. Verse 18 is so easy to just pass over as an obvious, but it's not. This is the first account of witness from a post-resurrection encounter, and Mary is witnessing. Because in the end, here's the reason, and this is what really grabs me. In the end, the question for all of us may not simply be, did I get all the details straight? I think details are important, but this isn't the primary concern. In contrast, but is the story I'm telling good news? The gospel, starting in Luke chapter 2, the gospel means good news. And that little truth has huge influence on me. In my daily life, within my loving known relationships, or with the checkout person at the market, it is my interaction um, um, manifest or demonstrated as one bearing good news to others? And that's a question we all have to ask in an authentic and real human way. That idea captures me. Mary moves from clinging to telling. That's the movement within this verse, verse 17 to verse 18. It's the same movement that is possible for each of us. I'm sure we've all experienced it, and we can experience again. I've experienced moments of clinging numerous times, and I've experienced moments of telling, of witnessing as well. And so have you. And so within this story, Mary becomes us, and she's moved from a clinging, fearful, um, unwilling or unable to let go, and that's holding her back, and taking heed to the invitation. And it's that Jesus offers, and here in verse 18, she's demonstrating. The first place she goes is home, or um, her home there, where the disciples are, and she goes and tells her friends what he has said to her. So here's the table time question. When others hear you and me, when they hear you and me speak about the gospel, the good news, the question really is, fellas, what are they hearing? Witness is absolutely critical. In a sense, it's all we have. I'm one that would say, I think information has some impact, but I would call it minimal. But witness is a powerful story. Witness doesn't make it true. Witness is responding to what has been true with me. And in that sense, I'll repeat it, it's all we have. So, what are people hearing, fellas, when you and I are talking about the good news, the gospel? And a side question that broadens this focus out a little more broadly, you can choose at whatever level you want to engage. What does the term witness, which we've mentioned over a dozen times, what does that term mean to you, to be a witness today? All righty, that is it today. Left a lot of time for table time, and I think we'd all love to hear your comments, questions, um, as we've pondered the movement of Mary from clinging to telling. Let's hear your thoughts, fellas.
And let me open the discussion
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
by telling a very fresh story.
Ah,
My day yesterday was in what we call in the funeral industry, in funeral profession, we call it a dignified transfer. It's a military term. And I spent my day yesterday doing a dignified transfer. A young man from northern Colorado here had lost his life in the military. And while he was in active duty, the military branches will all return him to his home or her to his home. Um, it's the kind of thing you often see on TV where the plane pulls up to the gate and the flag draped casket comes down and it's put in a hearse and it's taken off to the funeral home. The military returns is returning their loved one, someone's loved one to the family. And yesterday, my role was not to drive the hearse, but it was to drive the family car. And so we're driving in procession, escort going ahead of us up I-25, the overpasses covered with first responders, just honoring the service of the young man that we were bringing back. But I had a grieving mother right behind me. She was sitting right behind me in the car, and she was on her phone talking to friends as we came up. And she's in the depth of grief, but she had such a joyous smile on her face. And as she talked to her friends, it was so natural to talk about Jesus's presence in her life. And it was moving. It's about an hour and 15 minute, if things work out well, escorted procession back up to Fort Collins. That woman really witnessed to me how naturally and how the depth of her faith and how real Jesus was in her life. So that's been fresh on my mind ever since the day ended around 8 o'clock last night.
wow. That's a great story, Bob. It wasn't a performance.
It wasn't a performance. It was as natural as could be, and she told it with a smile on her face. She was a beautiful woman. Did she have moments of grief? I saw her after she was able to see her son for the first time. I saw her just in writhing grief at his casket.
Mm.
But throughout the day, that would return to a smile and a confidence of her faith, confidence in her faith, and how naturally she talked to about that to people who she was talking to on the phone. Is she talked on the phone to bunches of people just as she was as returning. She had gone to the base after she learned that she and her husband had gone to the base after learning of her son's death, and then she rode on the plane with him coming back from the base, and that's when I first met her as she came off the plane, and then I stood by her as we witnessed her son coming down the ramp from the side of the plane, and got to know her a little bit, but just to listen to her talk for that hour and a half, what a witness that was to the power of to the power of the gospel, to the power of the Spirit,
Yeah, yeah.
and just how transforming it is on people's lives when they have really um, connected with the good news and turned their life in that direction.
Well, I'd like to hear other guys comment. That is a really powerful story. The first thing I thought of, I was I was listening to you, Bob, as you were talking about her coming down the ramp or the um, stairway of the plane. And
Yeah.
I can't think of a better person to greet another person in grieving as Bob Powell. I really think you're just really cut out for that, and I think your very presence brings is calling people to peace. So I think that is really true of you, Bob.
Well,
The
thank you. Thank you.
the the thing that the thing that I'm refraining from is grilling you about more, but you brought up the idea that there's something bigger. I'm using generalized terms, but there's something bigger with this woman that she's responding to and awake to that's allowing her to go through this very painful time of life. Is that how you'd frame it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard her call her mom, and her mom was obviously about to end the day. I don't know if her mom was working or what the case was there. But in a very joyous voice, she wasn't grieving. She just said, "Are you about to get off work?" And she said, "Yes." She says, "Well," she says, can you come and meet me at the funeral home? I'll be there." And I think she was using her navigation app because she said, we'll be at the funeral home at 4:07 or something like that.
Yeah, probably.
And 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 she kept saying, "Mom, I need you. Mom, I need you. If you
Yeah.
can at all come, please come and meet me there." You know, it was a joyous kind of a plea. And so a little later, um, I was walking through our lobby, and she had me come over, and she introduced me to her mom, and just with a glowing face, and just talked about her mom and what she meant to her. It
Mm.
was just everything was so natural.
Yeah, that's a great story. I think we'd all love to hear from you other guys. What Bob is saying has caused us all to engage with this idea of witness in a real life setting that we will all engage, if not already, and how we view witness. What it it raises questions on how I view witness. Certainly, that idea has changed over the years, and I think we'd love to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts and your response to what Bob is saying?
So, Mike, I was listening to, I don't know if any of you guys know who John Lennox is. I just kind of came across him here a couple of weeks ago, but I was listening to a young man interviewing him. And the young man said he had grown up in a Christian home, but then kind of fell away from it and started believing more in atheism. But the last few years, he had started coming back to his faith. And he says, after interviewing different people of different faiths, he said, when I'm interviewing Christian men and Christian people, he says, I find this interesting peace that they have. And he said that it speaks volumes of people that are true believers. Is there's this certain kind of peace and it goes back to what Bob was saying. This lady was uh, she had joy in her heart, and I think when you think about true believers, there is that kind of peace, and it kind of ties in with the story of Mary today too, and And then one other little thing, and then I'll let somebody else talk. But when I go into a bank, there's this lady that's a teller. And every time I go in, she's, I suppose about my age, somewhere around my age. Anyway, she's always so happy. And she's got this enormous smile on her face. And most generally they all are, but this one lady is just so happy. And I was talking to her and I was telling her about my woodworking, and she goes, "Oh, my husband, he's a retired minister and he likes woodworking too." And I'm going, "Yep, it kind of makes sense."
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll let somebody else uh, speak.
Yeah. Thank you, Dean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for talking to us.
The term witness and witnessing is kind of culturally in the Christian world is like a an activity that
Yeah.
one does. I'm going to go out witnessing this afternoon. You want to come with me? At least that's the world I came from. And
Yes.
you know what I mean? And it's like the events that Bob talked about, I mean, are organic and natural and God sent. I mean, the right person at the place to do God's work. I mean, but it doesn't come up every day. I mean, that's happened twice in my 76 years of living. Have I done what Bob just described? It's not something that comes up all, you know. Mary going to the tomb and seeing the resurrected Christ is like that never happened before, and she has nothing to relate it to. It's just like I saw Jesus. My goodness,
Right.
I want to go back and tell my friends uh, that they're hiding because they're scared to death, and I want to let them know that he really got up, and I saw it. I saw the resurrected body. I wonder if their response, the disciples' response, being positive, would have been the same if it was a stranger that said it. The fact that it was their friend that said it, they knew her, they knew she was not given to fables and whatever. She said, "Yeah, I'm like you guys. I run in the same pack that you run in, and I just saw him. This is amazing." Um, I contrast her to Thomas. Uh, Thomas is like, I know I'm staring right at you, but I gotta touch you. I mean, this is just too much. I can't. My eyes are telling me you're here, but life experience tells me this can't be you. And Jesus is like, all right, well, then touch me, I guess. I mean, put your hand where my wounds are. If that's what you need, then do it. And then he gives that little amendment. You have touched me and seen, and now you believe. But blessed are those who
Yeah.
have not seen and yet believe.
Yeah. We're
Uh,
gonna look at that. Yeah.
and that is effectively the rest of us. Because I've never seen Jesus in his resurrected body. I've never had that kind of a phenomenon appear in my life. What I have the words about him and the telling the stories that other people have written down about him, and I believe those stories, so I tell people those stories.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's benefit to both. There's firsthand experience. This is what Jesus did in my life. He can do the same for you. Uh, this is what Jesus meant to you, and now in your moment of great pain and grief, he's supporting you. And then there's just the other part of life where it's you appear to need something in your life. Let me present to you
what I know about this guy. His name is Jesus, and I got a whole book about him if you want to go through it with me, and we'll, and I'll show you why this will change the world.
Yeah.
You can come from so many different places because some of us just don't have stories. You know what I mean? I can't come from a story sometimes because I don't have one.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tatsi. Yeah. You got to turn your mic on. While we're waiting for Tatsi, Vince, thank you. And you really raised some really great questions here. In these post-resurrection encounters, we're going to see numerous stories. Thomas will be one, the disciples will be the other. When we think of that term witness, I was taught it the same way we go and witness. We'd actually have scheduled times to go witness. That's not what we're seeing here. And we also have an unspoken expectation that when I witness, I ought to see results.
Yeah.
And what we're going to see in the very next small section is the disciples' state. Yes, now we don't know how John weaved the stories together of the encounters. He had the freedom to do that. But within the Gospel of John, internally, Mary's witness doesn't have the effect that we would expect. But really, Vince, maybe it's not about that.
Excuse me, but if I could interject briefly,
Yeah.
We have an unfortunate guidebook where the Bible is kind of like a highlight book, where Peter witnesses to Cornelius and the whole household believes.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a good story. Yeah, we like that.
Yeah, and I grew up saying that it's not a story; it's a record. Yeah. A story is written for a purpose. A record is recording what actually happened.
Yeah.
So we get these in the very next verse. You get the result of Peter's witness.
Yeah.
And so you're getting the highlights of an action, a response, and then a result. Yeah. But when you get into 2,000 years later, you and I walking around Fort Collins, the immediacy of what you're saying, you drop a seed and then God gives the increase. You're not looking at, fields of wheat behind you. It's like you say things to people and you reveal your life to people, and then you get on with your life. And God does with it, he wants with it, and you may never see the result of it.
Yeah.
And if the reason you do it is to see a result, you're going to get discouraged quickly, because that's just not how life works. But we're given the impression, purposely or not, we're given the impression that is how it works.
Exactly.
Go out there and witness, and then bring the fruit of your labors back to church this afternoon, and we'll have a barbecue. And it's does that ever happen? It's like, come on. That's why they have bands, and that's why they have pretty girls, and that's why they have loud speakers, and it's you're bringing people to something other than what you've said,
right?
Because the response is just not that immediate. People have to mull it over and think. You're changing hearts. That takes a while.
Yeah, that is really true. Tatsi, did you have something you wanted to share with us? Yeah, we still can't. We see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you. You just, if you're able to figure out your microphone or what's going on, you just start talking and we'll give you the floor. When you were talking, Vince, it reminded me of a story I haven't thought about for decades. When I was a new follower of Jesus, oh, let's say 20, 19 or 20, and I was working as an electrician. We were out wiring the homes. The new homes were around Warren Lake, Warren Shores. Those were brand new at that time. And I can remember, because of how I was taught, to carry those little gospel tracts with me, the little chick tracts. And I wore usually a blue T-shirt with a pocket in my apprentice days. And I had a quota. I mean, because this is how I think, Vince, because witness is important. Getting the information across to the other is important. So I would put, I don't know, let's say 3 chick tracts. And by the end of the day at 4:30, I had to have all those chick tracts gone because that's what I thought I needed to do to be a witness. Now, those days are way in the past right now, but that I can't say anyone told me that, but that's the impression I got.
Well, that's the commission that Jesus gave to the disciples. I mean, go out into the
Yeah,
world and witness. I mean, so there's a functional reality. It really what the implication wasn't go out there and live your life and talk to people as you see them. I mean, it was a purposeful go out there and seek people. So we took it in our Jesus movement days of the 70s. We took it as if I only talk to people that I run into in my life, they'll be my cousin and maybe another guy, and that's it.
yeah,
But but if you want to see outreach and you want to see a lot of people come to the Lord, you got to purposefully seek out people that you would not normally talk to. And so we did the ridiculous, we went to malls and
yeah,
went into went into bars and talked to strangers. And maybe that's why I'm so talkative. I spent 20, 30 years talking to people I don't know,
uh,
but for the purpose of looking for an entryway. So
yeah,
but on a functional level, if you want to introduce people that you don't normally see to what you think is going to change their life, you have to get out there,
yeah,
and it could be unfortunately mechanical and have no God in it at all. You could be selling vacuum cleaners, in effect.
yeah.
But you find your way. You try to make it do like Mary did. It's like I was just at the tomb, and my God, guess who I saw? And there he was.
And so what we're talking about here, Vince and I are kind of exchanging stories of earlier days when witness had a different frame. It's certainly that story, that framework is really different than what we see through Mary's witness.
Right.
Something actually happened with Mary, and she is just so excited about it. How it lands, we'll talk about next week.
Well, it's
We're
not
going
different.
to
It's not
analyze.
different than the day of Pentecost, though.
What's that?
It's not different that it's just a different record. But you go to Pentecost, and what the Peter did in Pentecost, he was talking to thousands of
Yeah.
people that he
And,
didn't know,
and
about his experience. So it just depends. There are many different processes that uh, are afforded you. She was in an intimate setting with her friends,
yeah, a
but it
localized setting. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, what what we'll see through Peter is that that'll be post ascension, and we'll talk we'll talk about that at a later time, but Peter was changed. Men of Galilee, listen. I mean, he gets up in Acts 2, and that's a different Peter. I mean, it is Peter, but it is a different Peter. Something happened to Peter, and he's witnessing out of that.
It's dunamis power. Yep.
Yeah, the power. And as Bob pointed us to earlier in his opening story, that power was, and from my perspective, is present in the here and now. And we saw it demonstrated through a grieving mom through Bob's story. We can see it as we interact with each other at this present moment. We can see it in a high tension situation with our spouse or with other loved ones, or we can see it as we check out the grocery line, buying a quart of milk. That the presence of the Holy Spirit, the presence of what we have is quite remarkable. And so the question is, well, then how do we engage that? Why, how? And that is what we're exploring. My guess, everyone on this call would admit, including myself, we don't have it all figured out. But we're seeking to not all figure it out, but we're seeking to live out of what is actually true. I would say that's true of all of us, or we wouldn't be spending the time doing this. So, Totsi, were you able to get your speaker going, or your? Well, no, I guess we'll have to wait for those thoughts. Fellas, we're going to knock off a bit early today because I have to get out the door. And thank you for coming. We've looked at Mary. We'll continue the post-resurrection encounters. There's so much interesting stuff coming up. And we'll move on to verse 19. I think it's 19 and 20 for next week. And we'll be looking at the disciples. And I'll be here next week. So we'll look forward to it. Guys, thanks Steve for the hymn and for the rest of you sharing with us your stories, and have a good week. We'll see you next week.
So long.
Yeah, now is the challenge. There we go. I found the end button. Bye for now, guys.
So long.